beautiful Monday morning. I hope you all had a good weekend. So we're going to start with a little bit of a lecture portion that I'm going to turn into an Edpuzzle here. So if you could grab your note packets and turn to page 20, if you don't have access to those, you should use the document that has been attached to this Edpuzzle assignment on Google Classroom before you proceed. So grab that out. We will be switching to another page too. We're bouncing around a little bit just to cover enough information. So today we're going to be talking about how we classify and organize organisms. We as humans are very big into categorizing things. We like to put things in boxes and make checklists of how things are related to other things. And we do that in the world too, because we like to organize things. So we're going to look at a couple of different ways in which we describe organisms, and then the main classification system that we use to help us organize the world, or at least the living world. So let's get started. So on page 20, you should be looking like this. So one of the ways we can describe organisms is by the number of cells they have. So unicellular means one cell. Multicellular means many cells. An example of this would be bacteria, protists, some simple single-celled fungus. Things that are many-celled could be humans, plants, dogs, elephants, anything of that sort that is very complex in nature. Mushrooms, even. So we can categorize or describe them using numbers. We can also describe them in how complex those cells are. If something is prokaryotic, it means it is a simple cell that lacks nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. So these are very simple, smaller cells. Examples of these, again, are bacteria. So we can describe them based on how complex the cell is. Bacteria cells are very simplistic. They don't have a nucleus, they don't have organelles, which we'll talk more about organelles to refresh your memory from 7th grade, like mitochondria and chloroplasts and things like that. Eukaryotic are larger cells with a nucleus and organelles. So these are like animal cells, plant cells, things that have more complex processes and needs for the cells to function. Now, eukaryotic cells will often be found in multicellular organisms, but not always. The same with prokaryotic cells. Prokaryote are usually going to be found in unicellular situations. And finally, we can look at how they obtain nutrients. So an autotroph is any organism that makes its own food. So this could be through photosynthesis or chemosynthesis, which is converting chemicals into food. So I want you to take a moment and think about when something would need chemosynthesis instead of photosynthesis. So photosynthesis, of course, is turning light into food. Chemosynthesis is turning chemicals into food. So sometimes organisms live in dark places or deep oceans where sunlight doesn't reach, so sometimes that is very useful. So in this case it would be plants and some bacteria and protists do this. Heterotrophs must find their own food. And I'm just being clear, autotroph means self-feeder. Heterotroph means different feeder. So a heterotroph gets its food from a different source, so it has to find its food. It can either consume or absorb. So this can be animals, fungus, some bacteria, and some protists. So that's another way that animals themselves or plants or any other organisms can be classified. Method of obtaining nutrients, complexity, and number. Now we're going to move on to the scientific classification system we use to organize life. Turn to page 12, so you're backtracking a bit here. If you do not have access to your notes, I will attach the document to the Google Classroom, so take a moment and find that note page so you can fill in these notes. So, as I stated before, we like to classify life. We like to put things in boxes and check off lists of how things are alike. We used to do that off appearance, and that has some issues as is, because if we go based on appearance, you can mix things up, and certain things that are similar might not be as similar as they appear. Like bats and birds, they are not as closely related as a bat and say a dog would be. So Carolus Linnaeus came up with a classification system to help put things in proper order and categorize things based on appearance, behaviors, diet, things like that. Later on, we were able to also incorporate DNA into that too, so we could even really nail down who was related to who. That's how we know wolves and dogs are practically the same species. Dogs are simply a subset of that species. That a bear is technically in the same family as a dog. Cats and lions are in the same family, things like that. So we came up with a classification system, and I'm going to go through our classification system. So his system did not include the new one, which is called domain, but he did include kingdom through species. So we're going to go through these really quick. So the first, I'm going to put domain at the top here just for a reference point, because domain came after Carolus Linnaeus' system and it was a bit more complex. But his first all-inclusive categories was kingdom. So we have kingdom Plantae, Animaliae, Protista, Eubacteria, Archaeobacteria, fungi. So we have several of those. So there are big groups that include a lot of organisms. And for us, our example of this, we are animals, is kingdom. I can fix that. Animalia. That is our kingdom. The next box down is phylum. So we're starting to get more and more specified. So our kingdom is all animals, so we call this Animalia. Our phylum name, which means all organisms with a nerve cord, is Chordata. So we're getting more specific. So we've taken out insects, sponges, things like that. So these are things that generally either have a backbone or a nerve cord in them. Then we get even more specific. Our next level down is class. Our class name means all mammals that have fur and produce milk for their young. So our class name is Mammalia. So that's the name of our class. We're getting even more specific. So we've taken out fish, birds, reptiles, amphibians, anything that would not be considered a mammal. As we go down this list from kingdom to species, we become more and more specific. Our next classification name is order. Our order contains all primates that have grasping feet and hands, fingernails, and fingerprints. So, for those who can't see that, our order is called Primata. Includes any other animal that's not considered a primate, so it excludes like cats, dogs, mice, anything that is considered a mammal but not a primate. So horses, cows, all of those are now excluded. We're focusing on primates. Now we're going to focus even more in the primate section and focus on the ones that only have opposable thumbs. So the next subset is called family, and our family name is Hominidae. Hominidae. That one's a harder one for me to say. So now we're specifically looking at primates that have these lovely opposable thumbs. So that's even more specific. Next, we're going to go down to genus. Now, genus is very important, and I'm moving this down just because I want you guys to see this a little better. So this is any primate that has increased cranial capacity. We are the only living example of this right now. So we have our own genus and species name. Our genus name is Homo, which means man. So our genus name means man. And then finally, the species name, which is very specific. So species name only applies to one species. So ours is sapiens. So that's humans. Now, if you put all of this together, the gene from kingdom to species, that is our entire scientific name. Now, we tend to shorten that to the two smallest or the two last to be more specific about which species you're talking about. When we refer to Homo sapiens, that is our genus and species name together. And that is our scientific name. Now, we write this very, very particularly, but before I show you this, I want to give you a mnemonic that will help you remember kingdom through species. So I'm going to write this up here. You can write it wherever you want to. But these are the letters you have to remember. And all of you will come up with your own mnemonic to help you remember this. But this is the one that always helps me remember the order. If you write that down somewhere, or your own version of this to help you remember kingdom through species, because you will need to remember the order. You should. So I always remember kingdom through species by King Philip came over for good spaghetti. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. You will need to know that order. You will also need to remember as you go from K to S, it becomes more specific. These species you're looking at, there's less and less possibilities. When you go from species to kingdom, the group broadens because you have more potential species to work with. The final thing I want to show you is how we write a scientific name, which you will need to know. We write a scientific name in two ways. So I'm going to write out ours. And I'm going to copy this. So we can write it two ways. Notice the genus is always capitalized. And the species is lowercase. We always do it that way. Genus must be capitalized. Species is lowercase. All scientific names are in Latin, as you've probably noticed as we went through this. And they are either written in italics, or if italics cannot be done, they are underlined. So you will need to know that as well. How a scientific name is written. Genus first in capital, species second in lowercase, either italicized or underlined, and always in Latin. Okay, I'm done for now. Now I want you to take the time to work on the species activity that is posted right below this on Google Classroom. You need to contact me to get your species name. So when you're done with this, contact me for your species name. Okay, have a great rest of the day. Bye, guys.